Welcome, everybody, back here at Veil of Sound, our regular Sunday interview. And before I introduce my interview partner here, I would like to ask everyone out there a question. Which band is, as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but as far as I know, there is only one band which has released on Hydride Records, Profound Law Records, and now the Flenser.
The trifecta.
The trifecta of modern American metal. Yes, in a way. So I'm very, very happy to have Rich Balling from Pyramids here on the show. So, Rich, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, Rich, we've already talked a little bit about where we are catching you, but please, for the audience, explain why you are looking like a bankster.
Yeah. So I'm about 21 plus years in education, and I've done everything from teach to be a assistant principal to, a curriculum writer, and now I am an education consultant. And so on certain days, there is a high bar for how I dress. And so today it's a tie.
So today
Yeah.
so no casual
Well,
Friday today.
well, and here's what's interesting though. I've only worn this tie, well, a tie for the last 3 days. And the reason is because I'm on this campaign to care again. After a while, you start to lose your fire for whatever your occupation is.
Yeah.
And so, in a move of self-respect, I have chosen to start trying again with my wardrobe here at work.
And we all have to agree. I mean, like many people will not understand that when they look at me here in the videos. I mean, like I also wear shirts to school. That is not my thing. But you
Yes,
would never catch me with shorts, which some of my colleagues do. And I'm always like, no,
that's your line. That's where you draw the line.
yeah, that's where I'm. And of course, I wouldn't wear something like Cannibal Corpse. Nothing too
Sure.
bloody to
Yeah, no
school.
dying fetus shirts. Okay.
Also, no A,
Yeah,
C.
that's
Yeah,
right. Cattle decapitation, maybe not that.
yeah. Pig Destroyer, something like that. But I'm not sure about agoraphobic nosebleed. That might work from the title. But anyway. So, Rich, we always like to also at the beginning ask if you want to plug any one of your friends' bands. And I'll give you a moment to think about it. I also, of course, want to plug something. I want to plug a Scottish collective that I always love, Ashenspire. Wonderful avant-garde metal. And I also want to plug them because one of their singers, Rylan Gleave, is about to release a wonderful new record called Lux Eterna. So if anybody wants to find out how a transgender opera man sounds when he's doing black metal, that's your collective.
Love it.
Rich, would you have something to plug?
Well, I have to say, because it's on my mind, I have never met this band, but I've been listening nonstop to the Belgium band Slow Crush. I don't know
Good
if you're
friends of us.
familiar.
Yes.
Oh man, the what I've heard of the new record is amazing. All the previous records, amazing. The production of the new material is just insane.
Yeah.
So, just an excellent band that I feel
Yeah.
needs to be plugged. I feel like
Yeah.
they're probably on the rise, and I think people hear about them regardless. But if you haven't heard them, I would certainly uh, plug that. And then there's a duo, sort of an electro duo out of Philadelphia here that I'm friends with, and they're called Corinne. And they are really good, really sort of 80s inspired, but man, they just write bangers. And so that's Korine, Corinne. And they're just touring machines. So they're constantly on the road, pounding the pavement, doing the work. So yeah, Slow Crush and Corinne would be the two right now for me.
And if anybody now wonders where to find the links, just look underneath this video. You will have the links in our show notes. Rich, when I listened to the new Pyramids record, for everybody, the new record has been out since May 2nd. If you haven't
Mhm.
had a chance to listen to it, shame on you. You should do it. The record is called, and I hope, let's put it like that. I'll pronounce it how the Europeans would pronounce it, Pythagoras. The Germans would pronounce
Ooh,
it.
I
You
love
would probably
that.
say Pythagoras, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I would say like Pythagoras. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And
I
when I
like your
first listened,
version better.
I will have to ask my Greek colleagues if it's correct. So Pythagoras, it's the name of a very famous Greek mathematician. And my first idea was like, okay, what's it gonna sound like? And then it sounded the total opposite of the title.
Ah.
I have been misled, so to speak, and I like that.
Okay.
But the first thing that I thought was like, okay, here is a band who would probably subscribe to the following sentence: Stagnation is death. Would you subscribe or deny?
Oh, subscribe. Wholeheartedly subscribe. Yes. And I feel like whether it's been conscious or subconscious, our entire journey as a band since 2008 has been one thing after another, like a move of reinvention. And so, yes, stagnation is not the way.
For everybody who has not listened to it, it is
Yeah.
a record which, first of all, I would say the very foundation is shoegaze. A lot of the things in it have black metal roots, but,
Mhm.
and now comes the fun thing, the beats are basically reggaeton, and I hope I pronounce it correctly, Neoperreo.
Yes.
Um, please explain how you came to incorporate those two genres into the pyramid sound.
Yeah, so always I'm a music nerd, right? And I'm always avidly seeking the next extreme version of whatever I was listening to before. And what's funny is I got into this rhythm where the music I was listening to got more and more and more extreme to the point where I found myself coming full circle and listening to pop records. And I'm a father to two girls, and so a lot of female pop artists that they were listening to, I sort of like adopted because when you're immersed in it, you sometimes get a taste for it, right?
Yeah,
And I know I was just thinking about the evolution of, a lot of our colleagues, great bands, like Deaf Heaven and whatnot, that or Yezu, where they found that shoegaze and black metal just sort of form perfect bedfellows. And what I noticed is, as I was listening to a lot of these pop artists and crossed over into Spanish pop and reggaeton, I started to think about the fact that the blast beat could be subdivided by almost anything. So
yeah,
you could take a very gauzy guitar layer, like in shoegaze, and run a blast beat underneath it. And that's how
mhm,
you've gotten this blackgaze movement, right?
yeah, yeah,
Well, similarly, you could take that don't rhythm
exactly.
and match it up with a blast beat, and
Yeah,
that's sort of new sonic territory, for lack of a better word. And it's getting harder and harder to find territory like that to
yeah,
explore.
yeah,
And so, but it wasn't contrived because I was legitimately every day listening to these artists that were in that genre. So I was like, what better timing than to take what I'm currently passionate about as a listener and explore new sonic territory with some of its threads. And so that's how it came about. And
no,
a quick connection to the title that you had mentioned. The title came before the recording. And
okay,
so if you were misled, that could be why we didn't make the music and then think, okay, what title might represent it. However, in hindsight, I still do think that it's at least for me, appropriate only because just that mathematical entanglement of different things happening at once, the push and the pull and the I don't know if we were to put numerical values on, like fast and slow, beauty and brutality. I don't know. It just feels like this amalgamation of stuff that could be in some way mathematical.
I like
So,
the idea of entanglement, totally,
yeah,
because I think you've just mentioned that reggaeton beat like dum, da dum, dum, dum. And of course, if
yeah.
you think in a four-dimensional space sequence, then you can put nearly everything under this dominant reggaeton beat. And the
Hmm.
reggaeton then is like the division between blast beats, black metal beats. It can be anything. Um, if we think of music as several layers of stuff. And then, of course, in the song itself, each and every sequence becomes entangled with the next one. How hard was it to sell that vision to your bandmates?
Okay, so that one's an easy one because it wasn't hard at all, actually. Now, at first, they might have been like, okay, that's kind of weird. But the thing is we've been doing weird for a number of years, right? And almost always, like what you said about stagnation, a lot of what we've always done is deconstruct genre or explore just how genres overlap. And so while this was a little bit more coming out of left field, I don't think it was necessarily a surprise. And so we've built a trust with each other at this point, and they were all in. They were like, all right, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
So we went in.
Also interesting
And
is
I,
one of
I
the.
don't think the
You
work
go
is
ahead.
done, by the way. I don't think the work is done. I feel like while we have sort of evolved from album to album, like just changing things up, this is a space where we've got at least one more album in us fully fleshing out this idea. I think that as proud of this album as I am, I think that it's sort of just the beginning of an idea. And so I'm looking forward to exploring it further.
For anybody, I'm always curious to see, especially black metal bands evolve. And that's also one of the reasons why I chose the Ash Inspire shirt for today, because just like Imperial Triumphant, they have black metal at the core, but they also experiment with, for example, a lot of jazz things, which I
Absolutely.
think is,
Great band.
and that is something that I think a lot of the more interesting black metal bands nowadays have in common, where you see
Yeah,
bands, okay, taking lessons from other genres and then putting them together. At the same time, now I'm very sure you were aware that if you do this, you might lose one or two or three or team fans.
for sure.
Unimportant?
Yeah, I mean, as I could say over and over that, like, we don't do this for other people. We make music for ourselves. We make art for ourselves. And to a degree, that's true. But really, we want people to like it. You want to be able to hold your painting up and say, look what I did,
Yeah.
Um, but at the risk of people not being into it, we can't not explore something that felt like such something we were so compelled to explore. And so it really wasn't a factor. For the most part, the reception has been really positive.
As it should be.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. But it is a weird space because it's definitely not a record that is going to necessarily appeal to fans of reggaeton because
No.
really we're playing with that rhythm, but it sounds really nothing like that fan would enjoy per se. So it is for people that are into new ideas and like alternative music and alternative genres. This is for those people. But like the hardcore metal fan or the hardcore reggaeton fan, we're probably not appealing to that. It's got to be listened to with an open mind. Not saying you're closed-minded if you don't like it, but you certainly need to like be open to try it.
Definitely. Um, Maybe, I don't know what you think about it, but maybe that's something that I thought about. Maybe in a way, this 9 year gap, and we'll also talk about how that 9 year gap came about. Maybe that 9 year gap also helps because, of course, there is a whole new group of people listening to black metal, and a lot of people now being familiar with, for example, the Flenser, which takes black metal and shoegaze and everything somewhere in between and cooks it up into new ideas. Maybe the 9 years were even helpful for gathering new fans.
I I 100% agree with that. Like, you know, for a lot of years we were essentially anonymous. We would go by our first initial and middle names. And we had no pictures online. We had no social media. That was for the grand majority of the band, even through the Profound Lore release. But and part of that was because most of us have a long history of being in bands and music and playing in other genres. And I don't like how fickle the metal fan can be sometimes. If they hear, for instance, that myself and two of the other dudes uh, played ska music at some point,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
They're immediately not going to even listen, you know? And so a lot of that was for that reason and for exactly the reason you just pointed out, because people are becoming more open because you go to a show now and there's so many different genres on the same bill. It felt much more
And
safe,
on stage at the same time, in a way, right?
100%. And so it just felt like safer to be able to like, okay, we can be ourselves and play with this stuff. People that are going to like it are going to like it. People that don't are not, but it's not going to be based on like who we are or whatever. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Before I come to my next question, to point it out, I'm not a huge ska fan, but I
Yeah.
have to say that I would still to this day say that one of my top 10 concerts ever was the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. I'm like, come on, how can you
Yeah.
not like that stuff?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, like having Dropkick Murphys open nearly 30 years
Exactly.
ago. Uh,
Exactly.
it's
And
interesting
now
that you,
it's
yeah, you
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
feel like now, you know, you it's if you're out in a crowd or you're at a party and you say that you're going to Obituary on Friday and then you're going to go see Rancid on Saturday, nobody's going to like judge you like they would have 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Everything was very like you could only be in this genre. You could
yes.
only so that's helped a lot.
Yeah.
So you're right with that for sure.
Yeah, it's also, and with even within the genres, the subdivisions were crystal clear, and you were not allowed to touch bass and foot into any other territory.
Yeah.
Still
I
remember
still
huge
don't under
debate. Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say I still am like blown away by the level of grief given to liturgy like in the early days. I mean, liturgy was just absolutely raked over the coals. And now it's like if you like them, okay, if you don't, okay, but there's not like the same level of judgment that was happening
That's true.
at, you know,
Yeah.
so it's like
Yeah.
anyway.
Also, great band. And if anybody wants to find out a little bit more about what Hala did with their last record, just go to our archive. I'm very, very proud to have one of the few long video interviews with Hala here on our channel.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong fan. On my record label that I've done on and off since 2010, Handmade Birds, I released his or well her what the Transcendental Black Metal the manuscript, like the first version of it. So um pretty proud of that. Love the band. Loved what she's done with every record. Another band that innovates and reinvents.
Yeah.
So
And that
yeah.
infuses, right? Infuses black
Oh
metal
yeah.
with concept. I mean, like
Insane.
if you look at the concept behind the last record,
Oh dude,
that was amazing. Coming
it's
back to
crazy.
your status as
Yeah.
a formerly semi-anonymous band, you're still playing a little bit with that because the press photos for the new record that I've seen,
Yeah.
you're still playing a little bit with that. You know, you still
Sure.
either your head isn't wrapped in foil or you're
Yeah.
wearing some garments to hide stuff, but that's just playful, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. a lot of that is to also like lack of resources or doing what you have with little. So like we've never been a video band, but like it was important to have a visual piece for the songs we were dropping. And so we tried to record some stuff and we did it ourselves. And sort of the best way to sort of blur the lines of this not having any sort of budget at all
Yeah,
is to involve various props and things. So that's where that came from.
yeah. And I also think that nowadays it's pretty hard to keep anonymous.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
still
yeah.
amazed at the fact that Token is able to pull it off every time, even though we might say this or that about the band, but the fact that I still haven't heard a real good explanation who is in Sleep Token. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, if anybody wants to find out about another good anonymous band in our realms, listen to Missouri Executive Order 44, who just on this day, May 30th, dropped a surprise record. Um, amazing grindcore, amazing grindcore.
Oh man, I got to
Um,
check it out.
yeah, so Missouri Executive Order 44, great band.
Love it.
Um, Also, something that we have already hinted at, and that is, I think, very, very important in order to understand the new record, is dichotomy. And I would like
Hmm.
to talk about that in the context of the cover. It's a very intriguing cover, and maybe you clue up how you came about using those nails, and
Hmm.
so how
Yeah,
did it come?
for me, that's one of the most ideal pieces of the release that sort of brings it all together. And what I mean by that is, uh, you've got a couple things happening there. So if you think of like the ominous nature of metal, and so this hand coming from into the negative space with the shadow underneath it feels just sort of inherently ominous.
And
And
the hand with the tattooed fingers.
exactly, exactly. And so you have that coupled with the fact that, that Miami nail art style
Yeah,
really coincides with, it's really suggesting the shift in sound, right? So
yeah,
like the new thread this time around is those rhythms and then also the female Spanish vocal. And so
yeah,
the nails just sort of capture both of those sides.
yeah,
And then throughout the art, there are other images of nails, and it's back to that entanglement. It
yeah.
feels like that nail art and fingers. Again, we're just getting into this weird, like, I don't know, mathematical entanglement that just it just felt right, felt iconic, but it also felt just representative of the sound
Yeah.
and all that. So I love that. And then that's another tie back to me listening to pop music is, that nail artist, Crocaine, she's in Miami and she does nail art for a lot of the artists I listen to, like Rosalia, for instance. And she's been featured for her nail art in Vogue and magazines like that. So it was a real honor that she was willing to let us use her nail art for art. And that's another thing I want to explore. If we do another release, I think the art's going to be in a similar vein, just different images, maybe. I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead, but
It's also in a way interesting because I think we both agree that a lot of metal music is male dominated. And
oh yeah,
the cover already challenges that notion completely, doesn't it?
100%. 100%. Yeah, I like that you brought that up. That's true. Yeah, David, who does a lot of our production, he mixed the record and he does the beats on our album. One of the things he said early on is, I I feel like this is like the Pyramids album for the female Pyramids fan. In other words, it's just suggesting that there's like an inclusivity that maybe wasn't there before. And so, I agree with that. That's a good observation.
And it's also a way that, of course, it is a record for the female Pyramids fan. It's also a record for the male Pyramids fan before now everybody thinks like we're pushing genders. Uh,
Yeah,
because you have
100%.
a
Yeah.
wonderful singer on it, Emy Smith,
Hmm.
um, who gives a lot of or who provides a lot of the soundscaping to the record just by delivering her vocals.
For
Um,
sure.
how did, first of all, how did that collaboration start? Let's ask that first.
Yeah, so she's in Argentina. And to be honest, I was searching the world over for a collaborator that could, like, slide into this water with us. And got a bunch of interest, a bunch of demos from people giving the songs a try. And none of them really clicked, but what she sent in just felt right. And a lot of it that's done in kind of a rap cadence. She's never really done work like that before.
Hmm.
So we went back and forth a lot, collaborating on what that should sound like. And it was, it just really worked. So I hope to work with her more in the future. I really hope to get her to the States with us. We've never performed live, but I really want to do that on this record. And maybe we'll get a call from Roadburn one day. I don't know. But if that
You
if that
will.
ever
I can surely imagine that.
if that
Um,
happens, we'll be trying to take her, of course.
remember to when we finish recording this, give me a moment.
Okay.
Um, so let's talk about then how you've already talked about her cadence.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting way, and now when you've set the rap cadence, it also became more obvious to me because I was wondering it was not a female vocalist who's just trying to sound like a new Sade, but
Right.
it's somebody who does her own thing. But the way you describe it, this has also been a challenge for her in and of itself, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Because she's used to just doing like traditional singing and um, maybe traditional pop singing, as it were. But with this particular, all that's going on in the songs, it was really important to just like sit in the music
Hmm.
and not be overbearing or projecting too much. It had to be a very almost sullen delivery, but still emote. So yeah,
It's also the way that it has to sound immersive and not on top of everything, right?
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can see that. Um, I want to quote you, and I hope that everybody then understands why Rich did this album. Um, the press kit quotes you with the following: over time, music compounds itself towards the extreme until one day it is so extreme and dense and noise rich that the brutal transitions into bliss. I can totally see that. Um, however, you would probably not say that your music before has been extreme. Like, for example, Deaf Heaven, sorry.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no. And when I was saying that, a lot of it was just talking about myself, my
Hmm.
journey as a listener,
Hmm.
and how, again, I might listen to something like The Locust, right? And then I might move into like, I don't know, throw on Burzum's Philosopheme or Merzbau's like, Pulse Demon or something. And
Hmm.
at some point it's so noisy and so dense but it's actually like relaxing. It's almost like
Yeah,
it has crossed over into meditation.
it is.
you know and so when that occurs, yeah, like it's I don't know, it's just funny how that works, right? And so for me, the listening got more extreme, more extreme, more extreme, to the point where my next extreme, as weird as this sounds, was pop music.
No, I get that.
So, it's like I got so noisy and so drony that then something more refreshing felt right.
Yeah,
But it wasn't just anything. I didn't just want ear candy. I
yeah.
wanted like Charlie XCX or somebody that's sonically doing really interesting things. And so that's how that occurred. And then ironically, just felt like the pop I was listening to was more extreme than some of the others that had just turned into sort of a blissful wash.
Hmm. And of course, also, for example, the length of songs is then something that is important.
Yeah,
I've talked to bands who say like it's more complicated for us to write a 3 minute thing than a 20 minute epic. I can see that.
yeah.
But then please explain in a little bit how this love for reggaeton and Neoperreo came about. Where did you find
Yeah.
that?
So back to the Charlie XCX reference, like I was really into her. I was flying all over the US on her like Pop 2 album, just eating all that up. And then, like back in the day, you would buy a record and read the liner notes and you would find out
Yeah.
about other bands,
Yes.
right? So similarly,
We are of that
collaboration.
age, right?
Yes, collaboration is so big now that it's sort of similar to the liner notes. So if
Yeah.
I'm listening to Charlie XCX, I look at who she's collaborating with, and
Mhm.
one of the people she was collaborating with is a rapper out of LA called Brooke Candy. And Brooke Candy did a lot of collaborations with a Spanish rapper, Laguni Changa. And I started listening to her and I was like, dang, this hits hard and I
Mhm.
love it. And I don't even understand what is being said. And I
Mhm.
love it. And so then the algorithm started feeding me other,
Mhm.
artists, and I just went down a rabbit hole and
Yeah.
it became something that I was super passionate about listening to.
And then it's interesting that you did not only come out of the rabbit hole at the other end, but you came out at the rabbit hole where you were able to understand as much of it in order to incorporate it into your own music. Um,
Exactly.
Let me guess, that was a long process, wasn't it? Time wise.
For sure. It for sure. And I would say like really it's a lifelong process
Hmm.
because of that slow compounding that has been going on in all of my multi-genre listening because of love for music. But yeah, my oldest daughter is 16, and so I would say it was probably 16 years in the making, arriving from like Taylor Swift and Ellie Goulding to Charlie XCX to now all these Spanish artists, Carol G, MJ, Six X, artists like that. Yeah,
Does
it's
your daughter still
pretty
listen?
intense.
Does your daughter still listen to that kind of music, or is she now already off to new territories?
She's kind of mixing it up a little bit, like uh the first, man, I would say first 7 years of her life, every single night we played the first Interpol album for her to go to sleep.
Good choice.
So yeah, I'm hoping one day that manifests in her discovery of Joy Division or Bauhaus or something. But um, yeah, she explores all kinds of musical territory, still gravitates towards pop, Sabrina Carpenter, and artists like that. So, but hey, a lot of and I say this with a straight face, a lot of the most innovation is happening when it comes to pop with the female artists right now. Like they're making the craziest moves in terms of production in
That's
my
true.
mind.
But however, with some of those moves, I have to say, like, that pushes it for me too far. For me,
Sure.
the example is always Beyonce doing a country record. That is
Right,
something
right.
that I still cannot wrap my head around.
Yeah.
And just because you're pissed at the country scene, I would never go that far. But anyway,
Yeah,
um,
that one's a really interesting thing. I have not been able to unpack that because a lot of what she's saying is that she's reclaiming the genre, right? It's really hard to tell because I also see how much money is in country right now, and that's why
yeah,
everybody's doing a country record.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of
But
money made in country. And
I
I
mean,
also,
I don't want to like burn a bridge before I cross it, but I could probably say with confidence you'll never hear a country pyramids record, but who knows?
be
10 years
careful,
from
be
now,
careful.
I know.
Think of Vow. Think
I
of
know.
Vow. Like, and I love Vow, and I understand a lot of her stuff, and I also understand when Brian says country can be a palate cleanser. There is something in
Sure.
there, but of
100%.
course, Various country and various country, just like various black metal and various black metal.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the 9 years between A Northern Meadow and this new record.
Yeah.
I mean, like in between was something that a lot of people try to forget, the pandemic. But I guess
Yes.
that's not the only reason why it took 9 years. Why? Can you give a short explanation?
Yeah, the short explanation is again having two kids and just getting caught up in life,
Yeah.
raising kids, uh, doing career things. It's funny because I think about the pandemic and that wasn't an obstacle for this at all. If anything, I'm wondering why we didn't do the album then when we had the time. But
Mm.
it was really just, we got caught up in other things. We're all doing other things and new fathers and this and that. And uh, when I really when that light bulb went off and I realized like the black metal beat could play well within the confine or the parameters of reggaeton, that's when I was like, this is our next thing right here. And then I kicked it into high gear regardless of my personal schedule because I was like, okay, I have something I really want to focus on.
I see. The last
Yeah.
question before we come to the infamous quickfire round. You
Sure.
have done, or a lot of your songs have been remixed.
Yes.
Could you see that also happening for Pythagoras, or would you say like, this in a way is already a remix album because it sounds very cool to me, and to me it sounds as if Justin Broderick did a Pyramids
Yeah.
remix record.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to this day, one of my favorite Pyramids tracks ever is the one that Yezu remixed on the first Hydra Head record. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
That guy's a genius. Love him. Um, but you know what? And I'll give you full credit for this if it happens. It's just like listening to you talk about this right now. Another light bulb went off, and I was thinking, how could I get some of my favorite artists that inspired us to play with this sound to possibly do a remix and then release it as a remix record? I do want to explore that now. I hadn't
Right?
thought of it. It hadn't occurred
Yeah.
to me. We have done a lot of remixes. In fact, like when we did the Pyramids with Naja record on Hydra Head, there was a limited just white label 12-inch vinyl of an older Lustmord remix that people could get. And I've been wanting to re-release that on the Flenser as a 7-inch or something. But anyway, love the idea, dude. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it hadn't occurred to me, but it's gonna happen.
Okay. So we always, at the end of every Veil of Sound interview, we always have our guests decide between options. Sometimes they are nicer, sometimes they are harder. Let's kick it off with some of the Neoperreo and Reggaeton artists that I looked up, that I listened to.
Okay.
Not having a lot of time, I have to admit I looked up the greatest hits and greatest artists to get it on.
Sure.
So I'll give you always two couples. Let's start off with Kelman Duran versus Defensa. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, I go with Defensa.
I'm pretty sure I already indirectly know the answer to the next one because you've mentioned one of the artists. Rosalia versus Acrilia. Or Acrila.
Rosalia for sure.
Okay. Tomasa del Real versus, I know I'm going to fuck this up, Amandititita.
Not familiar with either of those.
Oh, yes, I found something.
Yeah. I'll go with the first one, though, because it just sounds nice.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you'll know the next one because they were high on those lists. Nadi Natasha versus Ivy Queen.
Ivy Queen, for sure.
Tego versus Alexis and Fido.
Tego.
And now the obvious elephant in the room, Daddy Yankee versus Don Omar.
Oh, wow. Hey, I'm gonna go Daddy Yankee because I don't necessarily love either, but when I was a kid, Daddy Yankee had all kinds of hits. Like when I was in elementary school, I remember.
And now I'll give you two bands from our more common ground.
Sure.
Godflesh versus Jesu.
Oh, well, Godflesh.
Hmm.
Godflesh. I mean, that's a really tough one.
I know.
It's almost unfair. But like,
I never said
uh,
unfair.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
teacher.
To break the tie, I'm just gonna go with the OG, right? And like,
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, that first got the Godflesh self-titled with that Alesis drum machine, man, so good.
I would also choose Godflesh on one level if we're talking about single records, then nothing beats Street Cleaner.
Oh, Street Cleaner,
Definitely.
classic.
If I had to look at the whole body of work, then I might do the blasphemous choice and go with Jesu. I'm not sure. I
I
think
could see, I know what you, I would understand what you're saying if you did that. Yeah.
and to also explain a little bit that I understood with your quote, that the brutal transitions into bliss. There was
Yeah.
a time like 14, yeah, 14 years ago when my first marriage was rotten to the core and I needed
Uh,
something to keep me sane. And there was one record that nobody still believes to that day that I listened to fall asleep to. It was Sunbather by Deaf Heaven.
sure.
It worked perfectly. So I'll give you Deaf Heaven versus one of those records that I even love more than Sunbather, which is a rare thing. But I'll give you Deaf Heaven versus Have a Nice Life.
Oh, wow. Um, I'm gonna go Deaf Heaven. I'm gonna
Okay.
go Deaf Heaven only because both bands are fantastic.
Yes.
And I almost feel like I should have allegiance to Have a Nice Life just as the
The
Flenser
Flenser.
family. But I personally listen to Deaf Heaven far more. So I just have to be honest and go with that.
For me, it would be similar like the Godflesh versus Jesu. If I had to choose one record, it would have to be Deaf Consciousness. If I had to
Oh,
choose,
100.
because of if I had to choose for whole body of work, I might go with Deaf Heaven. But nevertheless, Dan,
Yeah.
Tim, we love you to death. We will always
Oh,
always love
100.
to talk to them again.
Yeah. I mean, that's an absolute classic, you know, for sure.
Yeah,
Death Consciousness is a classic, but I'm going to claim New Bermuda as my favorite Deaf Heaven release. I think that it was a completely underappreciated for
I
what it
know.
was. Is that was the one that followed directly after Sunbather, right? If
Yeah,
I'm
it
correct.
was. No,
Yeah, and
you are correct.
I like how they took it just a little bit more. There was just a little bit more aggression
Yeah,
to it, and
yeah,
I just it just they really hit the spot on that one.
yeah.
As a body of work, I'll go with them. If we're choosing an album, I would go with you on the Death Consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also have to choose that because that's one of a few record covers and T-shirts that I can really annoy my whole family with.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's Sunbather versus Death Consciousness, it's Death Consciousness.
Yeah,
If it's band versus band, I'll go with
I can see that.
Heaven.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So, Rich, thanks for all the interesting details into the new record. Thanks for the quick fire
Yeah,
round at the end.
for
And
sure.
I hope to see you on European stages sometime.
100%. And I appreciate the opportunity, man. This is really cool. Thank
So,
you.
thank you very much.
Yeah.